of communication to ensure that the demands of the people are being heard in the chambers of Congress. And we've built communities and coalitions of people across movements to ensure that everyone who stood up for Palestine understood that all our struggles are interconnected. As a Palestinian-led organization, we know that our struggle is defined for us, by us. And we appreciate the hundreds of thousands of you along the way who have chosen to walk alongside us, holding up our humanity and forcing dignity back for Palestinian life, back into the conversation. In the last 110 days, many of you have joined us in taking action. And in the last 110 days, we've watched how the US has failed to take action and failed to protect the lives of over 25,000 Palestinians. For weeks now, we have stood tirelessly in the halls of Congress and in the rooms of our elected officials, pressuring them and reminding them of their role to demand a total and permanent ceasefire and to put an end to the unequivocal aid and support to Israel. We've joined collectively to take well over 100 meetings and made hundreds of thousands of calls and emails to Congress to remind them of their role in the continuation of this genocide. And many have listened, but many have also turned a blind eye, eager to respond to pacts like AIPAC, of whom have convinced the United States Congress and President Biden that they cannot cut their unequivocal and unwavering ties to Israel. Yet despite the attempts to silence Palestinians, our voices have been overwhelming and walls have already begun to shatter. As our power in these rooms has grown, as has the need to ensure that the Palestinian voice is in the room forcing the change to happen, which is why we are finally launching our C4, giving us an opportunity to expand into our political power. This moment of devastation and grief has taught us yet again that we must lean into the power that we know our community has. And with that, sorry about that. And with that, we have been able to make the power that we know we have always had. This moment of devastation and grief has taught us again that we must lean into the power we know our community has, and with that begin shifting the discourse around Palestine and hold the officials accountable who failed to respond to our greatest needs. Our C4 gives us a chance to advocate for issues like ending military funding to Israel, endorse candidates who support the values across our struggles, and hold elected officials accountable who don't. This work would not be possible without the generation of leaders who came before us and the generation of leaders amongst us, which is why I'm grateful to be joined by a phenomenal panel of Palestinian women who have paved the way and continue paving the way for our path forward towards liberation. Today, we are joined by three incredible women that I know everyone listening already knows, but I am so grateful could join us to talk about why this moment is so important and what it's been like on the journey leading up to this moment. As a quick recap for logistics, we have ASL interpreting services available and are also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook for those who are looking for those services. Thank you to Body Language Productions and to Brandon and Sophie for providing ASL interpretation services. Well, I am honored to begin introducing those panelists. Firstly, I'll start off with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Guided by the belief that everyone, not just the wealthy and privileged, deserve access to opportunity and a better quality of life, Rashida has dedicated her life to amplifying and addressing the concerns of working families and everyday folks in Detroit and Wayne County, across Michigan and around the country. She has run some of the most aggressive and visionary campaigns Michigan and the country has ever seen, making history as the first Muslim woman ever elected in the Michigan legislature, the second Muslim woman to serve in any state legislature, and one of the first two Muslim women in the United States Congress. We are also deeply fortunate to have Huwaida Arraf, a Palestinian-American civil human rights attorney and social justice advocate. She has been involved in legal and grassroots initiatives for Palestinian rights for the last 2 decades, including co-founding the Nobel Peace Prize-nominated International Solidarity Movement and leading the Free Gaza movement, which organized sea voyages to Gaza to confront and challenge Israel's illegal blockade on the 2 million Palestinians living there. Huwaida was a 2022 candidate for the United States House of Representatives for Michigan's 10th Congressional District. And lastly, we have the incredible Linda Sarsour. Linda is an award-winning racial justice and civil rights activist, seasoned community organizer, direct action strategist, and mother of 3. Ambitious, outspoken, and independent, Linda shatters stereotypes of Muslim women while also treasuring her religious and ethnic heritage. She's a Palestinian Muslim American and a self-proclaimed pure New Yorker born and raised in Brooklyn. She's the co-founder of the first intersectional racial justice organization focused on direct action and power building in communities of color. Until Freedom is best known for her work on the Breonna Taylor police murder case in Louisville, Kentucky. Over the course of today's discussion, we will hear from each of our panelists to discuss just what it means to be in the political arena, what this moment means for Palestinians, and just how the issue of Palestine is part of our interconnected struggle. To begin, I'd like to ask you, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, you have paved the way to Congress for Palestinians as the first and only Palestinian elected representatives. In your time in office, your identity as a Palestinian has created opportunities and challenges. Do you mind sharing your experience in Congress and how it has impacted you?
So as everyone knows, I've always talked about it, but I like to center around the fact that I was born and raised as a proud Palestinian child of two immigrants from Palestine, one from Beit Hanina, one from Beit al-Foka in the West Bank. I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country. When I first got elected, it was by fellow Americans and neighbors who did not share my faith or ethnicity, but shared my values. And understood forms of oppression here at home are interconnected with oppression globally. And my time in Congress, as everyone knows, my mere existence is the resistance. I'm a walking bill. Many have never had someone talk about Palestinians or even just simply with no hesitation say Palestinians deserve to live as aggressively and as loving as it has been continuing to happen as I set foot on the House floor. And so much of the work I've been doing, as everyone knows, from, water is a human right. We always say, water is life, and cutting off water here at home in Detroit to cutting off water in Gaza is violence. And we must, again, continue to push for that. But my experience has been changing every single year. And even this year, as you all see, the silencing, the bullying, the intimidation is real. And as I tell my colleagues continually, even as I submitted for the congressional record, the South Africa case of genocide against the government of Israel into the congressional record, and as two members sat in the front that were two of 22 Democrats that censured me, I continue to remind everyone this movement and this creating the C4 is about the fact that they may be able to censure me, but they can't censure the world. And all of the movement folks that are involved in this understand that my existence in Congress is just a mere tool in the box, that the movement outside of Congress is where we can transform our country. Grace Lee Boggs taught me early on that transformative change doesn't happen in Congress or who's in Congress, but it happens, or in the White House, it happens because of all of us. Remember that. They didn't wake up, the President of the United States didn't wake up and say, you know what, our Black folks need to right to vote, or we need to support unions in our country. It was the workers, it was our neighbors and coalition building that made that happen. Again, we would not have the Civil Rights Act, but for the boycotts, the marches, the coalition building, the continued pushback from folks that did the bus boycotts for over a year, to those that did the sit-ins, to those that are on campuses all over the country were pushing against segregation and so much pain that was happening to our Black communities. And so we continue to do that, and it doesn't change when it comes to liberation of Palestine or the fact that we are trying to push back against war crimes that are continuing to be committed before October 7th. And so it is important, again, my experience in Congress is that I bring with all of that the movement folks. And that's why, I'm here, is because I want to support the growth of USPCR as we continue to find avenues and ways to support movement, is creating these, entities, organizations to, again, put more tools in that toolbox. And so I thank you all so much for the incredible work that you're doing. And again, they forget I'm from Detroit, and they forget I'm Palestinian sometimes, but I continue to remind them by speaking truth to power, no matter if my voice shakes. So I thank you so much, Iman, and being in space with Linda and Huwaida is profound. And you don't have to be a member of Congress to know what it feels like to be tried in attempted silence or bullying. We've all experienced it, but they can't, again, silence all of us.
Thank you so much, Rashida. Appreciate the response there. Always with you on that. All right. Next up, I have a question for Linda. Linda, you have been absolutely phenomenal and killing it. It's been so grateful watching you kind of out there and doing your thing. You are oftentimes the only Palestinian who is leading the charge in many of the movement spaces you're in, and we're just deeply fortunate for everything you've been helping us kind of pave the way around. As a leader in the political organizing through your C4 or at Empower, can you talk about what it's been like as a Palestinian leader in that space? Would love to get started on that.
First of all, thank you, Iman. Thank you to USCPR. I'm so excited. I'm watching our people, as Beyonce would say, get information. And unfortunately, obviously, it has taken some horrific circumstances to get our community here. But just want to say congratulations on this launch. And of course, I want to say to my dear sister, Congresswoman Rashida, they definitely forget that you're from Detroit, and they know that you will never back down, and they know that you are Palestinian. And part of me feels like they have given you the opportunity to actually shine, as much as it's been for me watching the ways in which Congress has tried to censor you. I actually think that God has a bigger plan, and you have been centered as a courageous and brave voice. I have a shirt that says, I'm not from Detroit, but I have a shirt that says, everyone versus Detroit. It's everyone versus Rashida, and Rashida stands up every time. So I'm just blessed to always be in space and cheering you on. And of course, my sister Huwaida, who's also outside and hustling and working and building power and building relationships. I'll say this, Iman, to your question. We work in a movement that has for so long been progressive, except for Palestine. So I can be in space where people will stand up for immigrants and migrants and refugees and Black folks, and for living wage and for workers' rights, and women's rights, reproductive rights, and we can go down the list. But somehow the buck has always stopped with Palestine in many of the political spaces. And I want to make a distinction, because not all of our movement spaces are electoral spaces or are organizing spaces from the perspective of elections. And I think what's becoming more sophisticated about our movement is that they're starting to understand that all of these are tools in the toolbox, and we have to be able to engage at all levels. But politics in America has been progressive, except for Palestine. People will literally have the audacity to talk about reproductive rights, prenatal care, talking about disproportionate access to healthcare in America. Somehow it doesn't apply to Palestinian women. So you can have a rally for abortion just the other day by groups like the Women's March and other reproductive groups, but then you have then you just forgot that we're in a genocide where there are over 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza right now, 300% increase in miscarriages, and that doesn't seem to be part of the theme of what you're organizing around, knowing that we are also the ones funding that lack of health care and the destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza. And so my experience has been one of an uphill battle, organizing, educating, teaching, and I'm willing to do that emotional labor. I know lots of times in the movement, people say, I don't want to have to keep explaining to you why my people deserve liberty, why they deserve freedom. I'm willing to do that work because our people deserve us and our power in the United States, because we have watched the lack of political influence for our Palestinian solidarity movement actually have direct impact on our people in Palestine. For God's sakes, we cannot even get our president to see that there is a genocide that's happening and that he himself and his administration are complicit in that genocide. In fact, we have been gaslit by our own administration. Lots of times we're celebrating members of Congress who are saying things like ceasefire, like, my friends, there's nothing revolutionary about saying end the bloodshed and stop what is happening in Palestine right now. But because of our, I would say, I won't say lack of focus, but I think we were really organizing in coalition building, building power, doing kind of grassroots organizing, that the pivot is here. It's at the right time for us to build the political power to go alongside the other types of power that we have built over the last decade. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to being part of a movement that no longer is progressive except for Palestine.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'm excited to actually touch on that in a little bit as well, to kind of talk about how Palestine fits into the interconnected struggle. But with that, Huwaida, I have to say it's been incredible watching you do all you've done on the Hill. I've seen how you've been out there demonstrating, disrupting these services, and reminding people that business is not going to move on as usual in the midst of a genocide. In 2022, you chose to run for office. What drew you to run for office then, and what insights did you gain along your campaign as a Palestinian?
Thank you, Iman. Thank you, everyone, the U.S. campaign. I am profoundly honored to be on such an incredible panel with my sisters. Rashida and Linda and you, Iman. And I'm grateful to everyone that is here because this is such an important moment. And I have been waiting for it for the launch of the C4 because of the importance of doing the political work. I describe myself as an activist for most of my life. And it was actually my activism that prompted me to go to law school and become a human rights attorney and try to do that work in the courtroom that we've been doing on the streets, but recognizing also that, we fight in the streets, we fight in the courtroom. We also have to be in the halls of power. We have to be in the room that is making these laws. And one of the things that I have been saying for a long time when I was doing that organizing work, for example, at a time when I was fundraising to send a flotilla to Gaza, and trying to fundraise was difficult, and it's not because people didn't want to give to Palestine. Our community and those who support Palestine are so incredibly generous, but so much of our giving and our organizing has been traditionally around addressing the humanitarian crisis that Israel is constantly creating without necessarily focusing on what we need to do to change the politics that create that humanitarian crisis. Because otherwise, we keep running after, putting these Band-Aids on. And it's important. It's important to keep our people solid. It's important to support the sumud, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people on our lands at a time, not just today, but for the last 8 decades that Israel has been trying to erase us. But at the same time, we have to dedicate maybe 5% of that effort to doing the political work. And that has been a process. And I think that it has increased, but that was kind of in my mind. And seeing, honestly, when I was, after I had done all the work in Palestine with the International Solidarity Movement and with Free Gaza Movement, I thought I was maybe a little bit too radical to ever be in the U.S. halls of power. But we see, I think Rashida broke that ceiling, and we have a lot of people now also, I think, joining that. And we have a small but powerful force in Congress sending that message that our representatives need to be accountable to the people and not to big money and not to corporations and these powerful lobbies. But that comes back to us in how we do that work. So for me, it was kind of a unique opportunity with the redistricting in Michigan, and that there was an open seat, and I had people locally encouraging me to run, and so I did. But more important than actually me running is recognizing how we do that political work and how we, if not run ourselves, see about supporting people who represent us, and how we mobilize, organize with small donations, but more importantly, with our time, with our labor, because, what is all that money that's fundraised used to do? It's used to get the vote, right? And if we can do that work to help get the vote in whatever way, we elect people that then aren't bound by these lobbyists and what they want, but actually to us. And so that was my campaign in Michigan's 10th congressional district. I think was great and a powerful one, opened a lot of people's eyes. We didn't end up winning, but one important thing is I am in Macomb County, and this district is frequently looked at in this county as a bellwether for how the rest of the country tends to vote. It is average, middle class, working people, union, labor, manufacturing. This is the district here, and it's right in the center. So it's a 50-50 kind of district. And I did not shy away, despite some recommendations from my initial campaign manager and others that, I toned down things on Palestine and whatnot. I decided that absolutely not. And while I did not run on Palestine, I definitely connected the dots, which a lot of people appreciated. And I was very blunt in terms of what the party and where it has failed and what it needs to do to actually live up to the ideals and the things it claims to stand for. And we did an interesting poll. I'll kind of wrap up with this, and we can get to other questions. But we did an interesting poll here among likely Democratic voters in this district, and it said, Huwaida, if elected, would most likely support the cutting of all aid to Israel because of its human rights abuses. Do you see this as a very strong reason to vote for her, a strong reason to vote for her, or not a strong reason to vote for her? and a full 67% thought it was a very strong or strong reason to vote for me. In this district that, for the most part, centrist Democrats at most, and like I said, actually, this is the home of the Reagan Democrats, and where Palestine isn't, we don't have strong kind of organization or mobilization in this area on Palestine. But in terms of when people learned about my platform for a first-time candidate running in a very crowded field, I ended up getting actually a decent amount of support. And so the campaign in itself was important. I think that, it might not be the end of my run, maybe in the future, but more important is to keep supporting people who run for the right reasons and who pledge to not be subservient and not to take the big corporate donor dollars, and people who represent our ideals. So we keep fighting wherever we can. We do all of the building that Linda talked about and build our coalitions, but also, as both my sisters said, we do that political work and also from the inside. So in the streets, in the courtrooms, in the meeting rooms, and definitely running for office and supporting those who do. And last plug, one of my actually friends decided to do just that, a long time, comrade in the National Lawyers Guilds and a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, a first-time candidate stepping up to do that. And so I just want to encourage people to take a look at the campaign if you're in Sacramento for Congress of David Mandel, who I think would be, as many people as we can get in this election cycle who speak truth to power and who are not shying away from Palestine would be just building on our work.
Thank you, Huwaida, and just love all the different areas you've touched on. I mean, I think there's a reminder for us right now that we don't have to accept what's within Congress and in the halls of these powerful institutions to be the norm, that we can actually shift it, we can challenge it, and we can shatter those walls down if they're not serving us. So I think it's a really beautiful reminder. And I think with that as well, we are entering the 2024 election cycle. We're in it. We're in the midst of it, right? And I think that there's a lot being said already about where Palestine fits into the conversation. But I think for as a movement, we always knew, even as Palestinians ourselves, we've always understood Palestine to be a part of a larger struggle. We've always understood it as not just a sole issue. But regardless of that, too often the fight for Palestinian liberation in the lens of the electoral process is minimized as that one issue. And we all understand that it's not. So how is Palestine a very local issue, and how do we contextualize that when engaging voters and C4 orgs? I'd love for all panelists to answer this, but I'd love to start with the Congresswoman, get your take on it.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe because my city's a bit different. And I mean, Huwaida's right outside its city and she sees it. I mean, there's a Black pastor that reminds me all the time. And I've been centering a lot of the work that I'm doing on the fact that, when I went into this Baptist church, that stuck out, and he looked right at me and he said, our country is not divided, we're disconnected. And what I understand that meaning is that we understand this connection around labor rights, around any form of oppression. I don't care if it's in the workplace, when it comes to poverty or whatever, and how it's connected so much at the ground. The one thing that I know this, in all the town halls and coffee hours I've had, of course, there will be the one who says, why aren't you supporting X, Y, and Z and funding and so forth? And I always look at the whole crowd and I said, don't you think $3.8 billion is enough? And everyone says yes. And I think if I can't get clean drinking water for my residents or the children in the high schools and throughout my district, and we're sitting there literally giving a unconditional blank check to support apartheid, to support oppression, racism, segregation of a whole people. Many Americans will tell you they don't support that. Many of which don't even need to know the history of Palestine, know this. They don't want their tax dollars to go and fund death and destruction. They want it to fund life. And so I know that much of the work I've been doing is making sure that we're doing that connection and making sure they understand that it is coming from a place that I believe human rights for everyone, not for just some, and that I represent everyone, not just some, as many colleagues continue to push back. But it's really, really important that we do that connection. I'm just lucky in that, folks like groups like Blacks for Palestine, I mean, it existed before Blacks for Palestine organization existed. I have folks that in my community, before I was born, had been to Palestine and had seen firsthand. And many of those folks are leading movements here at home in such a beautiful, profound way. And so I'm blessed in that people understand and they give credibility to much of the work that we're doing. But it's important for folks to know that the actions of Congress in funding such a large record-breaking defense budget of close to $900 billion when we can't get universal child care, when we can't even literally fix the broken systems that we have in our country from, every time it snows now in Michigan, we're literally seeing blackouts and seeing people still can't afford their water because it's gone up 400%. All of that to say is people understand that. And then when they realize it's being used to commit war crimes and commit human rights violations and international law, folks are, just taken aback, and they're really, again, the majority of Americans are very much against continuing to support those kinds of measures. Many believe in what we all believe, which is everyone deserves to live with human rights and human dignity.
Thank you so much, Rashida. Love that and really appreciate the commentary there. Linda, I guess the question, it goes the same for you. Would love to hear your opinions on why you think Palestine is a local issue.
I appreciate that question very much, Iman, because one of the things I keep getting asked literally about 50 times a day is, what are we going to do in the 2024 election? And I tell people, you're going to do what you do every year in every election, and that's you going to the polls. We cannot be distracted every 4 years by a presidential primary or a presidential general election. Every single day, there are people in your communities who are running for school boards, running for community boards, running for city council, aldermen, Congress, state legislators. Much of the horror that we have seen over the many years, whether it be around reproductive rights, whether it be around anti-immigrant legislation, lack of police reform, really happens at the state level. And so what often happens is people are kind of dormant, asleep until these presidential elections come, and then everybody gets up and says who we're going to vote for. So what I say to people all the time, that Palestine is a local issue because it really is a litmus test for your values and your morals. Right now, there is a genocide happening that is being paid for by our taxpayer dollars. You walk around your communities, whether it's in Los Angeles or in Detroit or the streets of Brooklyn, you will see homeless people. You will see migrants sleeping on our streets being chided by the mayors of different cities. You have watched a country that has substandard public education, infrastructure that they claim there's been an infrastructure bill, but I can take you to many cities in America, many towns where that infrastructure has not gotten or trickled down to some of these communities across the country. There are people that are not able to pay their rent or feed their families. And so I say to people all the time, don't ask me whether we should vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and knowing that there are also third-party candidates like Marianne Williamson, like Jill Stein, like Dr. Cornel West, like Claudia, and many others that I may not know about. I say to people, focus, because all politics is local. Politics is local. And for me, my values around Palestine is I want everybody to be able to have high quality public education. I want people to be able to have access to clean water. I want people to be able to travel freely in their communities. I want people to be able to have prenatal care, and not just some substandard health care, but actual good quality health care. And so all of the issues that we care about here in the United States can be applied to Palestine. The one thing that I do believe in my heart is that the American people are good people who do not support the indiscriminate slaughter of the Palestinian people or any other people around the world. And so in your local races, bring that to the table, just as you go vote on behalf of undocumented people, on behalf of children who are not able to vote in these elections. And so I say to people on this 2024 election, people will tell you it is the most consequential election of our lifetime. And here's one thing that I will say to folks here is that I will not be gaslit, nor will I allow anyone to patronize or lecture me about how bad Donald Trump is. If there is anybody that knows how bad Donald Trump is, it is me. It is my communities, it's the communities that I come from. I literally, just like Rashida and many others here, we organized every single day for 4 years under the Trump administration at the detriment of our safety and the detriment of our health, detriment of our families. We understand that Donald Trump is a dictator and he is a fascist. But we also can, at the same time, recognize that Donald Trump is a fascist and he is bad for the United States, and also criticize this Democratic administration that has literally aided and abetted a genocide. It is not either or.
nor will I accept that if Joe Biden is to lose this election, that we will be blamed for that. Instead of telling us as political activists to be careful, or to tell Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib to be careful, go tell Joe Biden to be careful. Go tell the Democratic Party to be careful. It is they that have to move with caution and start getting themselves on the right side of history ASAP, because they are the ones that their time is running up, not mine. And so again, all politics is local. Find those candidates that Huwaida talked about. There are many people in our communities that are from marginalized communities who are running with morals and values and centering all marginalized people, including the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Linda. Always bringing, just speaking your truth, always. And Huwaida, the same question goes for you as well. Would love to get your insight in this as well.
I don't know if there's actually much more that I can add to what my sisters Rashida and Linda said. Honestly, it is that interconnectedness of struggles. And I think people who are in the movement or learning or studying recognize that those who oppress and profit and benefit from the oppression of Palestinians are also benefiting and profiting from the oppression of other marginalized people here in the United States and around the world. And so growing that solidarity, recognizing that interconnectedness and working together is so very important. And sometimes people don't see that, but when you, like when we're campaigning, on Rashida knows it, when you're going door to door and you're talking to people about what they're concerned about. And one of the things I used to do is when people would tell me things and I would relate just to when I lived in the occupied Palestinian territory and what's going on there. And you know, this much of our tax dollars are going there. I mean, people would immediately recognize the injustice and see that connectedness there. And I also used to lead some delegations to the occupied Palestinian territory, and a couple of really powerful ones were people of color delegations, or people coming from communities in the United States that are, you know, historically marginalized, continue to be marginalized today, and just the difference in the ability to see things without having them explained, you know, what that means, or the depth of the injustice and the entrenchment of the, you know, the systems that are, you know, that discriminate and keep people down is easily recognizable to those who lived it, realize it, know it, feel it. And that work, I believe, like Linda talked about it, and Rashida, has been done and is being done, and it needs to continue being done, because the forces that we're up against are so very great. And recognizing the interconnectedness of the struggle, the fact that we're likely fighting the same, you know, these same forces trying to keep us down and that profit off our oppression, is important to strengthen our voices. So I think my sister said it all, but I just wanted to add that. And one more thing, I know there are a lot of questions in the chat about elections and who we vote for and how we strategize that. I don't necessarily want to answer that directly right now, but one of the things that I have been saying to my local Democratic parties, who at first, when I immediately came out and said to them, you need to make a statement back, you know, in October, and they were very tepid and saying, you know, this is not in our mandate, and it's not our place, and I think it's very complicated. Anyway, all of these excuses to not do anything. And now they are all, you know, fretting about, well, what are you going to do if your community is not going to vote for Joe Biden? Then what, you're going to give us Trump? I'm like, look, this is one of the reasons that I came out to you initially and said, you need to say something, because this is a Democratic administration. It is Biden that is enabling this genocide, and Democrats have been shamefully silent. And if you would have spoken up earlier as Democratic clubs and parties and committees across the country to say no to this policy, you could have had a bigger effect. So don't come now and say, oh, you're going to give us Trump. No, you are the ones, your shameful silence are the ones that are going to give us Trump, because you cannot expect someone. And in Michigan, we have a lot of people who have lost dozens of their family members in Ghazi, and were trapped in Ghazi themselves. And the American administration, the Biden administration, would not even meet with their families or talk to representatives of the Arab American community. So they turned their back on us, and now they want to scare us and that Trump is going to be worse. We know. but that doesn't mean that we have to continue accepting crumbs and then just vote for the lesser of two evil or a wolf in sheep's clothing, whatnot, whatever. This is an opportunity to push, to do better, to demand the changes that we need to see. And we can't let, as Linda said, we're not going to be gaslit. This is the most consequential elections of our lifetime. That is every single presidential election, right? It's time that we take the horrors that people have seen. I just this morning saw a poll that 1/3 of Americans across political lines think that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. 50% of Democrats think Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. And the other 50%, it's not that they agree with what Israel is doing, they just don't know necessarily that it's a genocide. But people see the horrors and disagree with it, and yet this administration is not listening. So what kind of democracy are we talking about there? So let me end with saying that, we continue to do the work no matter who is elected president, and we're not going to be bullied into taking responsibility if Trump gets elected. It's the responsibilities of those who allowed this administration to enable a genocide. But we will keep doing the work on the ground regardless of who is elected.
Thank you so much, Huwaida. And I appreciate, again, the reminder that we're here, we're building on our power, we're leaning into the years of work that we've been pursuing, that again, each of you has participated in. This is not the first time y'all are building on a legacy of speaking out and speaking your truth, and the many who came before you. I see a question that's, for many of us, oftentimes in the movement, we use our own language, and I realize that oftentimes we forget that maybe others may not be completely aware. So I want to recognize that for those who are joining us today for this webinar, we're launching our USCPR action, which is our C4, which essentially is our expansion to enter into the political and electoral arena. As a C3 and a 501c3, we've oftentimes been doing advocacy within, stepping away from electoral spaces, stepping away from electoral organizing to make sure that we're working within the confines of what a C3 is allowed to do. And it's been really wonderful and really tremendous to be able to participate in that way. In the last couple of years, we've watched just how the C3 is also quite limiting in times, just being able to kind of not being able to draw up on the fact that, there's constituencies out there who really care about the issue of Palestine, and how, as many, all our panelists here shared, is integrated into the many issues that every one of us cares about. And so through discovery and through trying to figure out how do we expand our own power, how do we step into a movement, how do we join our colleagues who are doing this work, we decided that we want to step up and actually create this arm that has more power to do more of that electoral organizing. So our hope here is to be able to put out more of those educational services and those, products. Like, I think many times people have actually on our C3 been able to engage with a lot of our toolkits, our action tools, making calls, sending emails, and a lot of that has been within the confines of the government capacity. We want to kind of enter that political capacity. We want to be able to say, hey, even as we're entering into an election cycle, we're here and our voices matter. Rather than stepping away from the conversation, we really want to lean in, which is why this moment has been absolutely important for us to step out. And we've been deeply appreciative to get this kind of up and running. So what is it? What are we actually going to be doing next? So that others kind of understand what our C4 is and appreciate the questions out there. Many folks have asked about, what are we going to get out of this C4? So one thing that I am really excited about and that's going to be launched in the next coming weeks is our 2024 voter scorecard. So I saw some questions around who do I vote for? What do I do? One thing that we've been trying to do is make sure that we have a set of metrics and, tools for you to use to be able to evaluate how folks have been, showing up on the issue of Palestine. So it'll actually show you a cross record of the last couple of years and how members of Congress have actually supported the issues of Palestine. Have they only further funded the military funding vehicles to Israel, or have they actually taken a position to hold Israel accountable in these last couple of years? That information sometimes can get pretty, wonky, and I think we want to make it as easy as possible and as accessible as possible. So our hope is our voter scorecard can be made available as a resource for that. Additionally, I think that, y'all already know, USCPR is an organization that's been dedicated to ending military funding. So we want to make sure that we build up on those commitments and those principles that we have always, drawn up around, and kind of expand into those electoral space, start working with other C4s who are doing this type of work too, in coalition with them. And, also get a clear commitment, just as we do on the C3, and around the principles and values that we stand for. So we're excited for the election pledge to be launched out as well. So we're encouraging organizations and individuals to start signing up once that becomes available. And then our hope, again, is to also start endorsing candidates. We really do want to take a part in this, in what's happening. We know that it's not just when, people are in their tenure in Congress or in their elected, respective local official capacities that we want to be able to influence them. We want to be able to play that, that role in influencing just what happens in those spaces throughout the entirety of the time that they are both running for office and in office. And so we're really hoping that through the endorsement process, we also have a powerful role to play when it comes to Palestine. And then additionally, we want to be able to expand our direct advocacy. I talked a little bit about the fact that we've spent over so many hours on, like, what's been happening on the Hill. And especially in the last 3.5 months, I just want to give a shout out to my colleague, Mohammed Khadir, who has been doing an incredible job at showing up on the Hill and doing this incredible amount of advocacy, whether it was on issues like the visa waiver program, or even now with asking folks to demand a total and permanent ceasefire, and beyond, asking folks to end U.S. military funding. We want to expand those services so that, again, and those resources that we've been able to provide and the insight we've been able to provide so that we can play that bigger role. So my hope is that can help kind of explain what this specific C4 is. Again, we really hope that people can check out our USCPR Action website to check out those sources. I think just to kind of take us back to some questions, I think a lot of you have kind of touched on, again, the power that we're really leaning in on. I want to acknowledge that on the advocacy end, oftentimes we've been hearing, I'm making these calls, I'm doing dozens of, I'm spending dozens of hours on trying to make sure that Congress hears my take on why I should be, why we should be asking for a total permanent ceasefire, why we should be ending U.S. military funding, whatever it is we may be, blocking weapons to Israel. But I just feel like Congress isn't moving quick enough. And so oftentimes I know that when we're, trying to engage and doing the advocacy, it can kind of sometimes be demoralizing, but we also understand that things are, sometimes move much slower than we want, but it doesn't mean that our power isn't there. It doesn't mean that we're not actually able to make the, create the influence that we want to see happen. So we know that our movement is working. I mean, well over 60 members of Congress have now called for a ceasefire. We just saw the resolution that Bernie Sanders placed on the floor in the Senate to try to get a report out and holding Israel accountable. While it failed, there were still 11 senators who really, stood in support of the Palestinian people to put it on record as a vote. And we've been really appreciative for what are actually not small feats. They're actually quite big, especially in a face, again, as I mentioned earlier, where oftentimes Zionist voices and the narrative is so powerful in these spaces. We want to acknowledge that the Palestinian voice really is paving the way for what's possible. Linda, I just have a question for you. As again, you've been doing this political organizing. So I wanted to kind of just ask you, so oftentimes Congress isn't taking the positions we are asking them for at the time and the pace in which we are asking them for, but yet I know that they're making these changes. There are waves that are happening. I'm curious in your end, from the organizing end, what have you seen working? What do you think is actually making, that influence happen, that change happen?
I appreciate that, Iman, because I think a lot of people have lost a lot of hope in this democracy in Congress. And I think we need to understand that we are literally having to break down the barriers that have been built over the last, 400 years in this country, at least the last 250 almost. 2026 will be the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in this country. And so I just want people to understand something that I learned from Indigenous elders, which is we work for 7 generations to come. Oftentimes our people get really emotional and they want things to pass tomorrow. They want things to move tomorrow. This is not how this country has ever worked before. So I'm not exactly sure why we think it's going to work that way for us. I tell people all the time that we oftentimes bring up the legacy of the civil rights movement. I want to remind people that a lot of people in the civil rights movement never got their opportunity to go to the polls and vote. They fought for voting rights. They sacrificed their lives for voting rights, but they themselves never got to see that promised land. They never got to see the fruits of our labor, or their labor, excuse me. And so what I say to people right now is we got to put our head in the game and support initiatives like USCPR Action and start building that political power. And we may not get a return on our investment for maybe 5 years or maybe a decade, maybe not until the 2028 election. But the question is here, do you believe the Palestinian people are worth your time, are worth your investment? Are you willing to be part of a marathon? This is not a sprint, my friends. Like I always say to people all the time that I have the satisfaction of knowing that one day some little Palestinian girl and boy will live in a free Palestine. I may not go to a free Palestine. I may not witness a free Palestine, but it's okay with me because I know that my work today, the work of Huwaida and Rashida and Iman and USCPR and Adala and all the organizations that are out there, PYM and USPCN, and we could sit here for days, the work that we do at Empower Change, all of that is part of building out this next 7 generations to come. And so I tell people all the time, keep doing the work. Keep putting your head in the game. I mean, the Palestinian people have been going through this for 75 years, my friend, 75 years. Can we all say that we have even given 5 years or 6 years or 10 years or even 20 years? So keep your head and keep your back straight and stay consistent and stay persistent. Here's one of the things about our opposition that I'll tell you. because you got to also, give a little credit where it's due. They're consistent and they're persistent, and they also put their money where their mouth is. The question is, are we ready to do that? The bottom line here is we live in a country that, as much as you want to deny it, is a corrupt democracy at many levels that requires votes and money. That's what it is. Like, if you want to change the ways in which this country engages in foreign policy and domestic policy, you got to play the political game. And so that means engaging, voting, supporting political advocacy organizations, showing up to the Hill, going to making sure that your members of Congress hear you. And here's a criticism that I have for a lot of communities that I'm part of, that I work with. You also got to thank people when they do the right thing. So oftentimes, even sometimes our Muslim congresswomen, for example, sometimes they might say something out of context or say something. And you as a Palestinian supporter may say, I don't know if I agree with what Sister Rashida said. And so you start going online and start talking nonsense. But then when Rashida is doing incredible work for the rest of the 364 days of the year, we're not making sure Rashida hears that we see her and we appreciate what she's doing. There are many members of Congress that have done good work, or at least attempted to do good work. We got to make sure that they hear us. I've heard from members of Congress over the course of the last decade that the amount of calls they get when there is a resolution or a bill on the table that has anything to do with Palestine, that they might get 10, 15, 20, maybe 50 calls, maybe 100 calls, but they'll get 1,500 calls from the opposition telling them to either support or oppose the bill. So what I say to all of you is, are we ready to do that political work? A lot of people don't like to do political work. I say to people all the time, if you are Muslim and or Palestinian and or Arab American and or a member of a marginalized community, you can't tell me you don't want to be political, because the nature of who you are as a marginalized person, you are political. Like, this country has politicized marginalized people, which means that we must also engage in the political process that politicizes our bodies, politicizes our communities, politicizes our schools. We got to play this game. People will also say things like, there's dark money in politics and super PACs and all this other stuff. And I agree with that. But guess what? Our opposition's playing with money. And that means we got it too. So what does it mean for example, Iman, we have 755 people who are with us right now. What if the 755 people said, I'm going to give USCPR $20 a month? Do you understand how much money that is? How much groups can do with things as little as $20 a month? So what I'm hoping people do today, that you got from us today, that you are inspired, that you are ready to go back outside and do the work, that you are going to engage not just in 2024 electoral politics, but 2025, 2026. And every year there's multiple elections sometimes. Like, people don't understand that it's not even one election per year. Sometimes people are going to the polls 4 or 5 times, depending on sessions, special elections, all kinds of things. So I hope that what people got out of this is that we have been incredible in protest, in organizing, in mobilizing, in coalition work, in solidarity, in direct action. But the time is now for us to build the political power that is worthy of our people in Gaza. Here's what I ask myself, and I'll end with this, Iman. I ask myself this, and it really, really is the thing that like sits on my heart every day. I think to myself that if I went to the streets of Gaza today, if I went right now and they let me into Gaza and I walked around and I said to the people of Gaza, are your Palestinian American sisters and brothers in America making you proud? Do you see us organizing at the level that gives you pride in the same way that you have given pride to the Palestinian people all over the world? My heart tells me that the people of Gaza will say no. They will say, we know you could have done better. We know that for the many years that you have lived in the United States, from your grandparents to your great-grandparents, that you could have built more political power, that you could have had more influence, so that we would not have to be living under this siege and under this occupation for, again, the last 75 years and 17 years for a siege. So are we ready? And asking ourselves, I'm asking all of you, are you ready to be a political force worthy of the people of Gaza? And I hope that the answer is yes.
Thank you, Linda, so much for leaving us on that grounding moment and thought. And you just triggered in my mind. I realized that there are so many people who never thought they would be heroes and reporters in these last couple of months that we've watched online, who've actually chosen to speak to us, not in their native tongue, but in English, because they understand that they're trying to convince the American base of what they have always needed folks to understand. And that's just kind of seeing their struggle I don't know how many people remind themselves of the fact that English may not be the first language of those in Gaza. It's Arabi. And I think that's really important to recognize that they're doing it intentionally because they know the power of the American people and what they have. And we've watched so many of, our neighbors like Bisan and Mutaz making, this really pleading to the American public around why can't you even be convinced of calling for a ceasefire? I think all of you have touched on this earlier before, but this is such a bottom line demand that we've been making in this moment. It doesn't even kind of fit into the larger movement of asking for our total liberation. But we know that in order for us to even get on that path, we have to end those means of violence. So I think with that, I want to kind of end us off with a question to all of you and start off with Congresswoman Rashida. Again, this is a really monumental moment for us as an organization. We're really excited to step into the C4, despite the fact that there really is no silver lining in the midst of a genocide. We understand that we have to lean into this moment and do what we can to expand our power and continue leading by the movement to make sure that our demands are heard by the movement. But what possibilities do you think are going to come of this in this moment? What are you hoping to see?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to answer as many questions in the chat. I don't know if you noticed that. Well, because they're great questions. They're important questions. And I can hear through the questions the sense of, is this going to work? It has to. We have no other option but continue to try and fight back. I want you to be proud of this movement because I kid you not, in the Rayburn building, I see who's coming to knock on the door to ask for a ceasefire. And it's not people that look like us. Or, and I even see some of the names in the chat. They're not Arab Americans or people of Muslim faith or, Palestinian. They are people of all different backgrounds, Americans, who are knocking on the doors of my colleagues in their district offices, in their congressional district offices, in their home districts in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan, demanding that they save lives, demanding the end of siege in Gaza, demand the end of unconditional aid. And it is different walks of life. I kid you not, Iman, the same person that fights honestly for Dreamers is also asking the same members, they advocate for Dreamers, about ceasefire and about what are they doing to stop the genocide. The same person that goes on the Hill all the time to talk about environmental justice issues are saying the same thing. I mean, standing there among veterans for ceasefire who said, we're done. We fought so hard. I mean, Iman, you saw them. They brought me to tears about the dehumanization that they had to go through to dehumanize a whole people in Iraq and Afghanistan. America is waking up. I want you to know, I mean, even hearing Justice Democrats, which is a great ally of ours, doing focus groups in October of just folks that don't even know who AIPAC is, but when you describe who they are, they're like, wait, that sounds like, is that allowed? Because let me tell you, it doesn't matter if it's AIPAC or anybody. American people do not want, money to be used to influence their government in a way that is harmful. I don't care if it's the healthcare industry, human rights, the war machine, or a number of special interest groups. Special interest groups are not respected in our country. People don't want anyone else to have a say in what they believe their tax dollars should be used for, but them as constituents. And so I just want you to know, like, the movement is just growing, and it's beautiful, and it's diverse, and it's this big umbrella that many of my colleagues think that it was going to get quiet, and they're shocked it hasn't gotten quiet. If anything, seeing SEIU get on board for ceasefire this week, seeing the growing number of city councils across the country passing resolutions, it's not shrinking. If anything, it's getting bigger and louder. And everywhere the president goes, he's hearing it. Everywhere any they call surrogates that they send out, they're hearing it. They're hearing it from folks they don't expect to hear it from. And now they're starting to hear it from folks that might not care about this issue, but care about whether or not the forever impeached president ends up in the Oval Office. Like I say to people all the time, I don't want Trump to win. Everybody knows that. But Biden needs to help me make sure Trump doesn't win. We can't do this on our own. And we can't expect to do it on our own. This is literally watching a genocide happen on live Instagram, literally every single day. The American people are seeing it, and it's just really taken aback. And I hear it in Michigan everywhere I go. They see themselves in what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza, and they can't look away. And as many folks know, in my community, we are not shy. And I think that they're hearing from everyone, do something about it. President Biden can't continue going down this course. It is going to be very hard. Last thing, Iman, why we don't have an option. Please know that I've been told they think we're going to forget by the summer. They think we're going to forget all the images, the thousands of children. They think we're going to forget. If anything, with this call, you see that we're getting more organized. We're building structures to actually make sure we are not forgetting. If anything, we're getting more organized, more loud, more engaged. And I'll tell you this, staying home and not voting is not an option. Vote, because I want them to see we are a voting bloc. Even if it means many people will skip the top of the ticket, there are many city council members that support ceasefire and support us. There are state legislators putting their literally out there, from Angie Nixon in Florida to Abdel Nasser Rashid in Illinois, and so many others that are on the ballot that support us. And if anything, I want to show them that we actually are a voting bloc. We vote, we are engaged in all levels of government, and we're not going to sit idly by. You've already made us feel invisible. We're not going to allow you to make us feel more invisible by not showing up. If anything, we should have records showing up to the poll to show that we came out to say we support saving lives. We don't support someone that's going to look away and allow literally a whole people to be ethnically cleansed right now. And again, I just stress this to everyone listening. The work that you're doing, it's changing. I can see it. People are coming to me asking me, what do I do about this? Everywhere they go, they can't seem to hold an event without somebody asking them about what they believe in and what they think, what their position is in regards to Palestinians right now and what's happening in Gaza. So I just want you to know it is in all corners. And I love when colleagues come up to me, they really do think I'm somehow in control of everything you all are doing in the streets or in their district offices or coming to their coffee hours. You guys know I'm not in charge. I don't know everybody in the movement. They need to understand those are their constituents, and they should sit down and meet with them and actually start working for them, not for special interest groups.
Thank you so much, Rashida. And always just amazing to see how much stronger you become by the day in your commitments to your values and principles, and really appreciate that. Hawaii, the same question for you. What possibilities do you think are going to come out of this?
Look, I think that there is a sea change. This is a turning point, and it has to be, and we have to continue to build on it. Yes, it is inspiring. I see so many people activated, and someone posted a link in the chat about the phone banks. They're happening everywhere. In Michigan, we're logging like 500-600 calls a day, and that doesn't mean our representatives are listening. Our two senators, we've logged thousands of calls to them, emails, postcards, letters, and requests for meetings, and absolute silence. Absolute silence.
But they're not on the ballot. Just know that,
Right.
that Senator Peters is not on the ballot, and we cannot forget when he is. And,
Yep.
Senator, I'm sorry. I just want everyone to
No,
know
go ahead. That's true. Go
that
ahead.
the ones on the ballot are worried. They are screaming at the White House, do something, do something, do something. Why? Because they're waiting for Biden to do something. So because many of them are just going to follow him, and they need that cover. And I'm telling you right now, these folks think, Senator Peters and many folks, and he knows how I feel about much of this, and many of them will continue to ignore me and not engage. A colleague, literally, that I'm on a plane with them coming back, engage me. I'll tell you what needs to happen. You need to literally be fair and just when it comes to this issue. But yeah, Hawaii, I just want you to know it is working, because I understand from folks in his office that they've never had this many calls coming about any issue ever in his office. So we're just got to show them we're not going to forget when next time he's on the ballot.
Yep, absolutely. And call it out and shame them for actually ignoring thousands of their constituents. I was on a local Dem club, actually, it was my district Democratic committee, and they were talking about an event with Debbie Stabenow, and I spoke up. I'm like, you mean Debbie Stabenow, who's been ignoring thousands of our calls? They want to make her out to be this great representative. And, I spoke up, speak up wherever you are. And I know that it, historically here, it hasn't been easy, and it's probably not easy today as people are facing repercussions and getting doxxed and losing jobs and whatever. But there's such a big community of support, and there is a legal network of support. And people know about Palestine Legal, but you might not know about the hundreds of attorneys around the country who have volunteered to help Palestine Legal, which is just a small organization, so that we can fight back against all of these, McCarthyist efforts that are put forth to silence us. So there is a network, and the more that we speak up, the more that we expose, and the more that people like Rashida and others who have long been in the streets aren't alone, and we increase our power. So what I wanted to say is that, yeah, we're doing this work, we're calling, and we continue to call every day, absolutely. Even if they're not listening, we continue to bombard them, and we have moved, right? There are actually 72 members of Congress who are for ceasefire now, and it was when, Rashida first put out the resolution, it was like 13, I think. So it has worked, and it is slower than we would like, but as Linda says, this work is we're not going to see overnight change. Also, resolutions in city council, we passed over half a dozen in Michigan. There are half a dozen more kind of in the works. And in my local Democratic club here in Macomb County, and I told you guys what Macomb County was about, like what the makeup is, I presented a resolution that not only is ceasefire, but suspension of aid to Israel. We don't want our money going to commit war crimes and genocide. And I wasn't even at the meeting. Someone presented it for me, and it passed unanimously. It passed. So we need to kind of continue to do that work at all levels. The more that we take it, whether you're a doctor to your colleagues, teacher, in your schools, wherever you are, to talk about it, making a call every day. Maybe you're not one to march. Maybe you're not one to disrupt. There are people doing that, but there is something you can do. And right now, I'll end with this. Right now, it's a crisis because literally it is a genocide, and hundreds of people are being killed every day and starved and more. I don't have to tell you that, but that is just the immediate. Like, ceasefire is just like now. The work has to continue, and we can't let up after that, because this genocide is just kind of a culmination of what Israel has been building up to, as we have been kind of not doing the work, as Linda said, that we needed to be doing to build the power here so that it would not have come to this. So we get a ceasefire, but we keep mobilizing, we keep building that power so that we can all see a free Palestine. And Linda, in our lifetime, inshallah.
Inshallah. Love that. And I love the reminder again of what's next, right? Like, you passed a ceasefire resolution. There's so many other ways that your city can show up. Divest. There are so many incredible avenues of opportunity to divest from these, imperial apartheid systems. And I think that there's lots of work to be done like that. I'm really excited to engage people. And with
absolutely. Just introducing a resolution wherever you are forces the conversation and the education. So obviously passing it is great, but just that educational opportunity, that's what's contributing to people actually waking up and, they recognizing what's happening is wrong and that this is a genocide.
Yeah, it's a great organizing tool. Like, when you have something like that, that's right in your backyard, that you can like walk or go to that, council chamber, that school board, Ann Arbor School Board just passed a resolution. Huwaida's right. I mean, it's a great organizing tool. And you actually saw that in the movement. For other movements, they use local city councils to support, minimum wage increase, the growth on Medicare for all and so forth. But yeah, I'm going to continue, Iman, trying to answer all the questions in the chat.
Thank you. It's been wonderful seeing the engagement. Love that. Linda, as for you, what are your possibilities, you think, coming out of this moment?
I will say that those 30,000 plus massacres are not going to be in vain and have not been in vain. I feel inspired. I feel moved. I know that the state of Israel has lost their propaganda war. They have lost major support across the world. I have been I can't even keep count, but for the first time in a long time, I'm actually getting invited to do teach-ins and do lectures about Palestine across this country. Right now, I'm actually tuning in here from Claremont, California. I've been to Alabama. I've been to Mississippi. I've been to Georgia. I've been to Connecticut. You name a state, except probably not Wyoming. But if you are from Wyoming, please invite us to Wyoming. But I've been to so many places where people who are now really tuning into what's happening to Palestine are saying, we want to learn more. My congregation wants to learn more. The community I come from wants to learn more. And so we now have everybody's we got the attention of the world. We got the attention of our fellow Americans. The question really is on us and responsibility of what we do with that next. Yes, we want a ceasefire, Iman, and that ceasefire is coming. Inevitably, it will come. Remember, the state of Israel can't kill everybody in Gaza. They're going to have a ceasefire at some point. The question for us is, what do you do the day after the ceasefire? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to be? Who are you going to be talking to? Because the goal here for us as a Palestinian solidarity movement is not just a ceasefire. That is just the basic imminent need right now for the people of Gaza. We need to lift the siege on Gaza. We need to end the occupation of the Palestinian people. And we need to be able to hold our elected officials here accountable for our complicity as the United States government in what's happening in Palestine. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to keep our head in the game on Palestine. Even when there's a ceasefire, we will not stop posting about Palestine. We will not stop calling members of Congress about Palestine. We will not stop calling for ending U.S. aid to Israel, U.S. military aid to Israel. We are going to continue to support members of Congress like Rashida, but we need to elect about 50 more of those. And so the questions are, who are the Rashidas that are running across the country that you're going to really focus on in your local areas? Of course, even a New Yorker like me, I want to support Rashida in Michigan, but I also know there are going to be people in my own city that are going to run, and they're going to be incredible because Rashida needs more friends to do the work that she needs to do. And so I have so much hope. I really do. The Palestinian people have taught me that, nothing material matters, right? That we have to live with purpose on this earth. And I think all of us have really leaned into that. I've been watching some of the most incredible Palestinian American leaders. And I'll just end with this. I've been organizing for about 22 years, and I've organized around all kinds of issues with all types of marginalized people. And for the first time, I'm actually organizing for my own place of deep trauma. And to see Palestinian Americans get up every day to organize for our people, watching our people get slaughtered on live stream is something that I can't fathom. How we do this? How do we get up every day? Sometimes I'm in awe of myself that I'm able to get out of my bed in the morning and do this work. The hope comes from the legacy that we're going to leave behind. Just like Mandela left the legacy of those South African lawyers who got up and said, no apartheid on our watch. We're going to the International Court of Justice, and we're going to watch the preliminary response from that court tomorrow. It comes from the Center for Constitutional Rights and Palestinian Americans who have gotten up to sue the Biden administration in his complicity in genocide. And we're going to also watch the testimony coming out of a U.S. federal court in Oakland tomorrow. So we are just watching the most incredible solidarity, organizing, courage, and bravery that I haven't seen in a long time on Palestine on this level. So anyway, don't lose hope, because my friend, I'm seeing things I've never seen before. And you're right, Huwaida, I need to be a bit more optimistic about seeing this in my lifetime, because it's true. I actually do feel it closer than I've ever felt it before. I'm just saying hopeful and saying that even if something were to happen to us today, you never know with these situations we find ourselves in, that we know that there's going to be a generation coming very soon that will see a free Palestine. So stay hopeful, stay organized, and continue to support the work that's happening.
Thank you so much, Linda and Huwaida and Congressman Rashida Tlaib. Again, thank you all. And I want to remind ourselves that the reason behind why we're even capable of seeing a free Palestine is because of these incredible women and so many others behind the scenes who are doing the incredible work of organizing. Linda, you just touched on it. I myself have not even had time to process the grief. We are moving past it so that we can just continue organizing. And just the other day, I actually got a chance to hear Angela Davis speak yet again. And she said, you cannot let the enemy organize for you. And I think that was a really beautiful statement. And I think it was a reminder as a recharge for us in this moment where oftentimes we want to maybe give up because we're not seeing things happen as quickly as we want. It's a reminder that if we stop organizing, the other side will try to out-organize or try to place their demands out there in the forefront, compromising what we've been asking for. But I know that, again, y'all are dealing with Palestinians. We don't give in, we don't give up. And I think that's a real thing. And I really appreciate to all of you. I see the amount of questions in the chat. I promise you we will save them. And there's so many actually wonderful things that you guys have had questions around that have, my mind's been flowing around what are the possibilities? What can we potentially do to make sure that we're answering the questions appropriately through new programs, through making sure that we're engaging in different ways. So while this webinar has been a really beautiful way to kind of launch out what the C4 is, I promise you that, again, as mentioned, we have a number of resources that are going to be made available on the USCPR Action website that I hope everyone can either follow us on, specifically with the website, pin it to your tab if you want to make sure that you're checking in on what's happening there, but also more importantly, check us out on our social media. We have USCPR Action on Instagram, I think right now, and then on Twitter. And I think, again, want to encourage folks to check in on that. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So everyone check us out through all those different platforms and make sure that you're staying in tune with the conversation. And if you don't hear from us or you don't see something that you are looking for, again, I know that we're in the midst of an incredibly busy year. Make sure you reach out to us at Contact USCPR or through any of these platforms. We will do our best to make sure that we are attending to the questions that y'all have. And if you have any ideas that you proposed, again, I want to make sure that we do the best to our abilities in answering them. But with that, again, I appreciate everyone who's who stayed beyond the time we thought we would originally be around. This has been a beautiful conversation. And again, while there is no silver lining in the midst of a genocide, there's a lot of hope that is coming out of this. And I just want to remind everyone here that we Palestinians deserve to live a life free of genocide, free of occupation, and free of apartheid. And that is what pushes us to do this work every single day. And without y'all, it is truly not possible. Like, y'all really, really give us hope. And I think, like, this beautifully esteemed panel of Palestinian women, I don't want to undermine that. This has been truly beautiful. And I thank all of you for contributing to this conversation today, and talk to y'all soon. Thanks again, all.